the smile that disappeared. The first person who noticed something was wrong was someone most people never noticed at all. Officer Sarah Chin had spent 6 years guarding palace corridors where history walked quietly in polished shoes. She had learned to observe everything: posture, tone of voice, small changes in routine. Royal security was not just about protecting bodies. It was about protecting stability. And Princess Charlotte was usually the most stable, predictable joy in the entire palace. Every morning, like clockwork, Charlotte walked past Sarah's post on the west corridor at exactly 8:12 a.m. She always smiled. Sometimes she waved. Sometimes she whispered Mandarin phrases she practiced just to surprise Sarah. But on a gray Tuesday morning in October, Charlotte walked past without looking up. No smile. No wave. No spark. Just silence. Sarah felt it instantly, that quiet instinct trained by years of watching people. Something was wrong. Not bad mood wrong. Not tired child wrong. Something deeper. Something heavy. Charlotte's shoulders were slightly hunched. Her steps were slower. Her eyes looked older.
I sketched this for
like
the
someone
gala.
had quietly
It's
taken
beautiful.
away
The
part of
detail's
her
perfect.
childhood overnight.
See this part? It's inspired
Sarah
by
watched
you.
the young princess disappear
doing a
down the
wonderful
corridor
job.
beside her
It's
nanny
so
and felt a
fun.
strange
You're
coldness
natural.
settle in her
Can I try
chest.
stirring?
By Wednesday, whispers had started among staff. Charlotte spoke less at meals. She avoided eye contact. She stopped bringing drawings to the guards. She stopped asking questions. And Charlotte always asked questions. Why do clouds float? Why do guards stand still for so long? Why do people bow to my parents? Now she barely spoke at all. Thursday afternoon was when Sarah's concern turned into fear. During garden time, Charlotte's favorite hour of the day, the little princess sat alone on a bench. The swing nearby moved gently in the wind, untouched. Sarah stood at her assigned position but kept glancing toward Charlotte. The child stared forward like she was watching something only she could see. When the nanny asked if she wanted to play, Charlotte just nodded quietly and said, "I'm fine." But she didn't move. Friday was when everything changed. Sarah broke protocol. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough. When Charlotte was alone near the rose garden, Sarah approached slowly and kneeled to be at eye level. "Your Royal Highness," she said gently. "You seem sad today." Charlotte looked at her. Those eyes stopped Sarah's heart. They looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had been carrying fear for too long. "Officer Chin," Charlotte whispered, "do you keep secrets?" Sarah swallowed. "Sometimes," she said carefully. "It depends what kind." Charlotte leaned closer. "Even if someone says bad things will happen if you tell?" Sarah felt cold. "Has someone threatened you, Charlotte?" Tears filled the little girl's eyes instantly. She opened her mouth. "Princess Charlotte." The sharp voice cut across the garden like glass. Lady Pembroke, head governess, approached with stiff posture and tight lips. "You mustn't distract security staff," she said coldly. "She wasn't distracting me," Sarah said calmly. Lady Pembroke's eyes locked onto Sarah. Controlled, sharp, warning. "I believe you have duties to attend to, officer." It wasn't a suggestion. Sarah stepped back. But as she turned away, she heard Charlotte whisper, "They watch everything." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She replayed the moment over and over. Charlotte's voice. Charlotte's eyes. That whisper. They watch everything. At 2:30 a.m., Sarah made the first decision that would change her life forever. She accessed internal security review footage. Technically allowed. But digging deeper? Not encouraged. She watched Charlotte's routine from the past 2 weeks. At first, everything looked normal. Breakfast with family. Morning lessons. Garden time. But then she saw it. Every weekday at exactly 10 a.m., Lady Pembroke escorted Charlotte to the East Wing. A hallway where cameras were disabled. For exactly 90 minutes. Every single day. Sarah checked maintenance logs. The East Wing room had been recently soundproofed. New biometric locks installed. Camera lines manually disabled during certain hours. Access allowed only to 3 names. Lady Pembroke. Lord Harrington, Deputy Private Secretary. Dr. M. Sterling. Sarah frowned. She had never heard of Dr. Sterling. She checked Palace Medical Registry. Nothing. She checked internal consultant lists. Nothing. Then she searched external records. And found him. Dr. Marcus Sterling. The network behind the silence. The palace looked normal on Monday morning. But it felt like a place holding its breath. Staff spoke in quieter tones. Footsteps echoed louder in long corridors. Doors closed faster than usual. And behind closed doors a storm was building. Sarah Chin stood outside the private family sitting room, waiting to be called inside. She had barely slept. Not from fear, from thinking. If Dr. Sterling had been removed so quickly, if Lady Pembroke vanished overnight, then someone powerful had helped them. And powerful people did not panic unless something bigger was at risk. Inside the room, Prince William stood by the window, hands behind his back. Catherine sat beside Charlotte on the sofa. Charlotte leaned against her mother, silent. Not cold. Not distant. Just careful. Like someone measuring every emotion before allowing it to exist. Sarah's chest tightened seeing it. This wasn't the lively child she remembered. But Catherine stroked Charlotte's hair slowly, whispering soft reassurances. Small steps. Gentle healing. William turned when Sarah entered. "We've confirmed Lord Harrington's financial connections," he said quietly. Sarah stepped closer. "A private foundation?" she asked. "Yes. The Sterling Foundation for Child Excellence." Catherine spoke softly, voice steady but heavy. "They claimed it funded elite emotional resilience training for children in high-pressure public roles." Sarah's stomach turned.
Subject is approaching the
"That
checkpoint.
sounds like rebranded emotional suppression," she said. William nodded. "And worse, the foundation has donors from politics, media, and private corporate groups." Sarah's mind raced. "Influence building," she said. William looked at her sharply. "Yes." Rebecca Torres arrived later that afternoon through private royal security clearance. She placed a folder on the table. "This is bigger than one rogue therapist," she said. She opened the folder. Charts. Names. Financial flows. The Sterling Foundation wasn't just operating in one country. It had programs in 5 nations. All targeting children of high-influence families. Future political heirs. Public figures under age 16. The goal? Officially, emotional strength. Reality? Condition compliance. Reduced emotional response. Higher authority acceptance. Catherine closed her eyes slowly. "They were trying to reshape leadership personalities," she whispered. Rebecca nodded. "If you can shape how future leaders feel, you shape how they lead." Charlotte shifted slightly beside Catherine. Sarah noticed immediately. Charlotte was listening. Understanding more than people thought. Sarah knelt beside her gently. "You are safe now," she said quietly. Charlotte looked at her. Then asked something that broke every adult in the room. "Was I bad because I cried?" Catherine pulled her close instantly. "No," she whispered fiercely. "Never. Feelings are strength, not weakness." Charlotte didn't cry, but she leaned into her mother harder. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued explaining. "The foundation runs through layers of shell charities, but the funding leads back to one major central board." William leaned forward. "Who?" Rebecca slid one final page forward. "The Sovereign Future Initiative." Sarah frowned. "I've never heard of it." "Exactly," Rebecca said. "It operates quietly. High-level donors. Policy influence. Private education programs." William exhaled slowly. "And they wanted access to Charlotte." Rebecca nodded. "She represents future influence. Public trust. Global attention." The room went silent. The weight of it settled over everyone. Charlotte wasn't targeted randomly. She was targeted strategically. That evening, palace security leadership met privately. New rules were implemented immediately. All external child consultants suspended. Full review of private foundation ties. External investigation quietly initiated. Not public. Not yet. Because this level of influence had to be handled carefully. But the most important work wasn't political. It was personal. Charlotte began meeting with a new child therapist, one chosen carefully by Catherine personally. Sessions focused on rebuilding emotional trust. Not removing emotions. Encouraging them. The first breakthrough came on Thursday. Charlotte laughed. Just once. During a board game with Catherine and William. It was small. But it echoed like victory. Sarah noticed changes too. Charlotte started making eye contact again. Started asking small questions again. Not as bright yet. Not as carefree. But coming back. Slowly. But danger hadn't disappeared. Rebecca called Sarah late Thursday night. "I think they know you helped expose this," she said.
Out here.
Sarah leaned against her, the attempt to bury the truth. The first sign came quietly. Too quietly. 3 weeks after the first arrests, media coverage shifted. Not dramatically. Subtly. Stories about unverified allegations. Opinion pieces about overreaction to private child development programs. Anonymous experts defending high-performance emotional training. Rebecca Torres noticed it first. "This isn't random," she told Sarah over coffee at a quiet cafe. "This is reputation repair." Sarah stirred her tea slowly. "They're trying to normalize what they did." Rebecca nodded. "And discredit anyone who exposed it." Inside the palace, official statements remained careful and minimal. Review ongoing. Child welfare always priority. External partnerships being re-evaluated. But privately, pressure was growing. Not direct threats, but influence. Political figures asking quiet questions. Private donors requesting meetings. Legal teams requesting document access. The network wasn't attacking openly. It was trying to outlast the investigation. Meanwhile, Charlotte's recovery continued in small, meaningful steps. She started drawing again. At first, simple shapes. Then gardens. Then people. One afternoon, she handed Sarah a drawing during a supervised visit in the courtyard. It showed 3 figures. Charlotte. Catherine. A small stick figure with a security hat. Sarah felt her throat tighten. "You're very brave," Charlotte said quietly. Sarah smiled gently. "So are you." But healing wasn't linear. Some days Charlotte was cheerful. Other days she was withdrawn. And every time she saw white clinical rooms, she went silent. The therapist explained it simply. Recovery from emotional manipulation is like rebuilding trust in your own feelings. It takes time. Catherine attended many sessions herself, learning how to reinforce emotional safety. William adjusted his schedule. More school drop-offs, more bedtime stories, more normal father moments. Public duties still happened. But family came first. Then the second wave hit. Legal. Rebecca called Sarah one evening. "They've filed defamation pre-actions against multiple journalists," she said. Sarah sat up straighter. "On what grounds?" "Claiming false representation of educational therapy programs." Sarah sighed. "They're not denying it happened." "No," Rebecca said. "They're trying to redefine it." The palace legal team prepared quietly. Because if public cases started, everything could be dragged into open court. And Charlotte deserved privacy. But then something unexpected happened. A second whistleblower surfaced. Not from the palace. From inside the Sterling Foundation's Data Analysis Division. Anonymous, but credible. They leaked internal documents showing program design goals. Language like, emotional flattening improves authority compliance. Reduced attachment response increases leadership isolation tolerance. Family emotional bonds can be strategically minimized. Rebecca stared at the files in disbelief. They weren't even hiding the theory internally, she whispered. The investigation accelerated. More financial trails uncovered. More shell organizations connected. More consultants quietly resigning from affiliated programs worldwide. But with exposure came risk. One evening, Sarah noticed a black car parked across from her apartment building. Not illegal. Not suspicious enough to report. But it stayed for 2 hours. Then left. She didn't panic. But she told palace security anyway. Extra monitoring was assigned quietly. Inside the palace, William made another decision. He authorized full cooperation with international child protection investigators. If this network existed globally, it needed to be dismantled globally. Not just locally. Rebecca's biggest article went live 2 weeks later. Carefully fact-checked. Legally reviewed. Supported by multiple independent experts. It didn't name Charlotte. But it exposed the system structure. The public response was immediate. Concern. Debate. Demand for oversight of elite child development programs. And something powerful happened. Former participants from other countries began speaking up. Not dramatic accusations. But emotional stories of pressure to suppress feelings. Pressure to be perfect. Pressure to disconnect emotionally to meet performance expectations. The narrative shifted. From conspiracy. To systemic problem. Back at the palace, Charlotte showed another milestone. During a small family dinner, she cried when talking about missing her old school friend. And Catherine smiled softly and said, "It's okay to cry. It means you care." Charlotte cried harder. But afterward she laughed too. And that balance was everything. Then came the moment Sarah would never forget. One cold morning Charlotte walked past her, the public reckoning. By early winter, silence was no longer possible. What began as quiet internal investigations had grown into something much larger. A global conversation about how power, pressure, and perfection expectations shaped young lives. And this time, people were paying attention. The first public crack appeared during an international child welfare summit in Geneva. Prince William was scheduled to give a routine speech about youth mental health, something
I
he
heard
had spoken
something.
about
Stay
many
alert.
times before.
Copy. Following you
But
in.
this time something was different. Behind the scenes, legal teams had spent weeks preparing language that was truthful without exposing Charlotte's private experience. Because protecting her childhood still came first. When William stepped onto the stage, the room was filled with diplomats, psychologists, education leaders, and media. He paused, looked down at his notes, then looked back up, and spoke from the heart. We must ask ourselves difficult questions, he said calmly. Not only about physical safety, but emotional safety. About how ambition, pressure, and performance expectations can sometimes cross lines we never intended to cross. The room grew still. Children, he continued, are not projects to perfect. They are people to protect. No accusations. No names. But the message landed. The speech spread globally within hours. Clips went viral. Mental health organizations praised the message. Child psychology associations began reviewing elite training structures for high-pressure youth environments. Inside the palace, Catherine focused on something quieter but equally powerful. Rebuilding Charlotte's sense of normal childhood. More school playdates. More art time. Less structured, perfection training. More emotional expression encouragement. One afternoon, Charlotte painted something new. Not palace gardens. Not formal portraits. A bright, messy painting of a playground under a huge sun. Catherine framed it immediately. Sarah noticed something else too. Charlotte started teasing guards again. Small jokes. Playful questions. Childlike curiosity returning piece by piece. And every time she laughed, staff
Morning.
members
Cold one.
exchanged small
Join me.
relieved smiles.
It's warmer here.
Meanwhile, Rebecca Torres faced the biggest professional moment of her career. Her long investigation was nominated for an International Journalism Ethics Award. But more importantly, it had triggered official oversight reviews in 3 countries. The Sterling Foundation's remaining branches closed within months. Quietly. Legally. Completely. But not everyone accepted defeat gracefully. Certain political figures publicly criticized media exaggeration. Some corporate donors claimed misinterpretation of educational methods. But public awareness had already shifted. Parents were asking harder questions. Private schools began publishing emotional wellness policies. Elite youth training programs faced independent reviews. And something unexpected happened. Several former foundation employees came forward voluntarily to assist investigators. Not because they were forced, because they realized what they had been part of. One said in testimony, "We thought we were helping children become strong. We didn't realize we were teaching them not to feel." Back at the palace, a private family moment marked a turning point. Charlotte was helping Catherine bake cookies. Flour everywhere. Messy counters. Laughter. William walked in and stopped just watching. Then Charlotte looked up and said, "Papa, I think being messy is fun." William smiled. "I agree." Later that evening, Charlotte asked
Thank you,
something
officer.
serious. Why did those people
Everything
think feelings
is in
were
order.
bad? Catherine knelt beside her. Sometimes people get so focused on success, they forget what makes us human. Charlotte thought about it, then nodded slowly. "I like being human." By spring, most legal cases connected to the network were resolved through regulatory action, financial penalties, and professional bans. Not dramatic public trials, but real consequences. And most importantly, permanent monitoring systems for similar programs. One afternoon, months later, Sarah stood at her usual corridor post. Charlotte walked toward her. Running this time. Actually running. Something she hadn't done in months. She stopped in front of Sarah, slightly out of breath. "I got 9 out of 10 on my spelling test," she announced proudly. Sarah smiled. "That's impressive." Charlotte grinned. "I missed extraordinary. It has too many letters." Sarah laughed softly. "Yes, it does." Then Charlotte leaned closer and said quietly, "Thank you for asking questions." Sarah nodded. "Always." Because that was the real lesson. Not just about one child. Not just about one palace. But about something bigger. Sometimes systems fail. Sometimes powerful structures hide behind good intentions. And sometimes,
I
it only
sketched this
takes
for the
one person
gala.
asking,
It's beautiful.
why,
The detail's perfect.
to start
See
changing
this
everything.
part? It's inspired
But
by
one
you.
final truth remained. Healing wasn't a moment. It was a journey. And Charlotte was still walking it. With love. With family. With safety. With her smile slowly becoming brighter than ever before. The smile that changed the future. Spring arrived quietly that year. Not with grand ceremonies. Not with public celebrations. But with something far more important. Normal mornings. The palace gardens slowly filled with color again. Cherry blossoms along the pathways. Fresh green grass replacing winter gray. And on one bright Tuesday morning, Princess Charlotte laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not a careful laugh. A full, loud, uncontrollable child laugh. The kind that makes adults turn their heads and smile without realizing it. Sarah Chin heard it from halfway across the courtyard and felt something in her chest loosen that she didn't even realize she'd been holding for months. Healing had not been fast. It had not been simple. There had been difficult days. Days Charlotte didn't want to talk. Days she asked questions that had no easy answers. Days she woke up from bad dreams and crawled into Catherine's bed. But there had also been victories. Small ones. Then bigger ones. By March, Charlotte returned to full school attendance. By April, she joined her favorite art club again. By May, she volunteered to read aloud during class presentations. And each step was celebrated quietly, carefully, respectfully. Because everyone understood now. Strength was not perfection. Strength was recovery. One afternoon, Charlotte asked to visit the guard corridor again. The same one where Sarah stood most mornings. When she arrived, she walked slowly. Not scared. Just thoughtful. Sarah stood at attention, but Charlotte waved her closer. "Officer Chin," she said seriously, "do you know what my therapist says?" Sarah knelt slightly so they could speak comfortably. "What does she say?" Charlotte smiled. "She says brave people are not the ones who never feel scared." Sarah tilted her head gently. "What are brave people then?" Charlotte thought carefully. "Brave people are the ones who feel scared, and still tell the truth." Sarah swallowed. Because that was exactly what this entire journey had been. Meanwhile, the world outside the palace had changed more than most people realized. The international oversight committees created after the investigation began publishing global child emotional safety guidelines. Elite education programs introduced emotional wellness transparency policies. High-pressure youth training institutions were now required to include independent psychological monitoring. And the phrase, performance resilience conditioning, quietly disappeared from policy documents everywhere. Rebecca Torres published her final piece on the investigation. Not about scandal. Not about blame. But about lessons learned. About how systems can drift when accountability fades. And how transparency protects not just individuals, but entire futures. The article ended with one sentence. Sometimes the most powerful change begins with someone refusing to ignore a small, quiet sign that something is wrong. Inside the palace, life settled into a new normal. But a better normal. More family dinners. More unstructured playtime. More emotional conversations openly encouraged. Even staff culture changed. Training now included emotional awareness recognition. Not just physical security. One summer evening, the palace hosted a small children's charity art exhibition. Nothing political. Nothing dramatic. Just children's artwork displayed to support youth mental health charities. Charlotte insisted one of her paintings be included. It showed a bright sun, a playground, 3 stick figures holding hands, and one small stick figure wearing a security hat. Sarah saw it from across the room and felt her eyes sting. Later that night, after guests had left, Charlotte found Sarah near the courtyard fountain. "I made that one for you," Charlotte said shyly. Sarah blinked. "You didn't have to do that." Charlotte shrugged. "I wanted to." Then she added quietly, "Because you saw when I stopped smiling." Sarah knelt again. "Yes," she said softly. "And you taught me something too." "What?" "That even small voices can protect big futures." As the months passed, Charlotte's smile fully returned. Not forced. Not careful. Natural. Bright. Alive. And every time she smiled, it carried something new. Strength. Understanding. And something rare for someone so young. Wisdom. Years later, far beyond this moment, historians and child welfare experts would quietly reference the reforms that began during this period. Not naming individuals. Not dramatizing events. Just noting that emotional protection standards for high-profile children changed significantly. Because someone asked questions. Because someone listened. Because someone told the truth. One